So I review a lot of in-ear monitors, and frankly, most of them are from Chinese companies that most normal people have not heard of. Well, here I've got a couple of new monitors from a company that even us IEM geeks probably haven't heard of. Akoustyx is, well, it's spelled pretty funny, but they are, as far as I can tell, a pretty new company, and they've got two core lines of in-ear monitors. All of them are packing balanced armature drivers. And here we've got their top of the line dual driver models. We've got the R120 and the R220. And unlike what I typically review, Akoustyx is actually an American brand, and not just like American in mailing address. These things are actually manufactured in Nashville, which is interesting. They're also not exactly budget. I think the R120 goes for around $170, while the R220 goes for around $200. So they're definitely not cheap, but they're also not ridiculously expensive for professional monitors. They're aiming a little bit higher than the typical consumer budget stuff. And just to be clear, I'm not a musician. I just like listening to music. So let's go ahead and open up the boxes and let's find out, do I like listening to music with Akoustyx? With a K and an X and a Y. Look, I didn't spell it. All right, I've spent a week with these two different acoustic sets, and up front, look, these are not for everyone. But for me, I like them quite a bit. Compared to basically everything else I've reviewed, the build on the acoustic sets is purely utilitarian. And especially so here with the R220, which I've got. Look, it's just basic utilitarian plastic. These things are just a small, very small plastic tube with a couple of balanced armatures stuffed inside. I don't know that they're particularly handsome. They're not ugly, but they're not particularly handsome. Just, again, pure utilitarian. As far as comfort though, I'd say they're actually both quite good. They come with a bunch of different options for tailoring the fit to your own ears, right? They've got different wingtips, different ear tips. But personally, the setup that I found that I prefer the most is actually here, the R220. I don't need the wingtips. They're not bad, but I don't need them. But I do like it with the supplied Comply foam tips. With this setup, I actually went outside walking around San Francisco. I walked to lunch with them, and I was pretty surprised at how strong the sound isolation is. Like, this is such a minimal setup. Yeah, surprised at how much noise is being canceled out. And I think it comes down to the nozzles on these things are really quite narrow, which means that you can compress this foam tip and really get it pretty deep inside the ear. And I think it's creating a really nice seal. And again, just pretty impressive noise isolation. The R120, which is not this set, that's the other set. It's also pretty comfortable, but I think that one, for me at least, it requires the silicone socks. There are just some edges on the plastic that they're not sharp, but when they're in your ear for a while, you start to feel the edges of the plastic, and having the silicone socks on it just smooths it out and it makes it more comfortable. The Akoustyx cable is also similarly very utilitarian. It is not plush at all. I don't know, it's got some like visible kinks in the build. Not super clean, but at least it lies flat. I don't have any issues with it fighting me or being annoying. No issues with microphonics, so I've definitely handled worse. So you might love or hate that utilitarianness to the build quality, and I think the same thing goes for the sound tuning. This is a sound tuning that I like quite a bit, but I don't think it's for everybody. Both the R120 and the 220 have pretty similar tuning, which I would describe as fairly flat with a little bit of emphasis in the upper mid-range and the treble. Bass on these is very, very light, which is where I think a lot of people are gonna peace out. These are not bassy in the least. If you want a really bassy headphone, look somewhere else. Look, I compared these to my FiiO FA1, which I reviewed previously, and I described that as a fairly bass light headphone. These things make the FA1 sound bass heavy. The Akoustyx tuning is, I would describe, pretty cool sounding, right? The bass is definitely, again, it's very light. It's more of a pitter patter than a slam. I think that vocals can come forward. There's a lot of air and separation between the instruments. Detail on these things is exceptional. Everything's fast and sharp without being too fatiguing, I think. I'm enjoying really listening to everything on these things, but especially like vocal focused or even acoustic tracks sound really, really good on the Akoustyx. Worth calling out that the tuning between the two sets, the R120 and the 220, is actually subtly different. Okay, maybe it's not so subtle a difference. The 220 here, I think, has actually got quite a bit more treble energy to it, which with the stock silicone tips, I actually find that it's a little bit too much treble. Sibilance starts to creep in and the sound is just, it's a little bit fatiguing. But like with a lot of earphones, throwing on a pair of Comply tips helps tame that treble quite a bit. And thankfully they do actually come with Complies. And again, I quite like the way that the R220 fits with the Comply tips. And configured like this, I think that the treble is basically just about perfect. If I had to choose between the 220 and the 120, I'd go with the 220 just based on the sound, but the difference is really, really pretty small. Out of 5 stars, I'd give both sets of Akoustyx 4 stars. The strengths here are just a nice, wide, very clean mid-range with a little bit of treble sparkle, but not a lot of bass. In some ways, these kind of remind me of my T2 Pros, which I love, especially here with the 220, but I think that the mid-range on these things is just a lot wider and a lot cleaner. The sound stage is a lot broader and it just sounds like a more mature version of the T2 Pro. It's a sound signature that I find kind of analytical, but still also pretty relaxing, and maybe that makes it good for musicians, but again, I'm not a musician. I just like listening to music, and now I like listening to music on these things. If you're interested in checking out either the Akoustyx R120 or 220, of course, I've got links in the description down below. While you're down there, you can hit the like button for the video if you liked it, you can subscribe to the channel, and then I'll see you on the next super review.